Welcome back to this episode of The Self-Led Leader. Today we have a special guest with us, Beth Carr. With over 18 years of experience across 5 different industries and over 70 million in client exits, she is the founder of Fortified Branding that provides brand strategy for 7 to 8 figure B2B companies and leaders who want positioning that builds trust and moves sales. In today's episode, we talk all about the power of the right brand strategy, the importance of understanding your brand storytelling, and how overlooking some foundational pieces in the way that you create your brand narrative can lead to chaos that ripples out throughout your company and your business. I hope you enjoy it. This is a good one. Welcome to The Self-Led Leader, a podcast for high performers who want to lead from alignment, not expectation. I'm Dr. Christina Ady, a social psychologist, and I'm here to help you lead with clarity, not chaos. This show is about what happens before the strategy, your mindset, your nervous system, the inner leadership that shapes everything you say and do. Because presence isn't about being loud, it's about being aligned. Let's get right into it. Hi, Beth. Thank you so much for being here on the Self-Led Leader podcast. Can we start by talking a little bit about you and the wonderful work that you do right now?
First of all, I'm so glad to be here, Christina. Thank you. What's the wonderful work I do right now? I really enjoy helping companies figure out how are they going to go to market very clearly with a story and a position that really makes them differentiated from all the other companies that may be selling similar products, services in similar industries. And the other wonderful work that's kind of attached to that recently is as we're doing that for companies, mostly tech, manufacturing, biotech, there's some beauty and wellness and some service providers like real estate advisors, high net worth. A lot of times when we're helping them with their companies, they realize, well, now that we've identified my company, how am I going to position myself in the world? And so we're also having a lot of fun co-collaborating with these thought leaders in helping identify what is their story. How are they positioning themselves out in the world so that they're attracting talent and retaining them, attracting buyers and clients, which could be a hole we could go down in this conversation. Some of them are also entering like the winter of their career. They're at that pinnacle moment where they're like, I think I have one more big company to transform in me. And so they're at this place where there are these thoughts about legacy, creating a book. They've authored a book. They now want to do a TED Talk or be a keynote speaker or a mentor or a tab for advisory board. So that's been an incredible new offering that we've been doing for these executives that has been attached to just the discovery of differentiation. Yeah.
And the first place my mind goes is the transition of doing that for these founders. They must face so much self-imposed pressure trying to figure out how to show up and how to position themselves. Because I feel like I'm seeing a split in a sense where some people are really going like the expert, the authority way. And then some people are trying to be so like personable in their brand. And I imagine it's quite hard when you've built up this reputation for yourself to show up and be visible and expose yourself in a way for who you are despite what you've accomplished. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. A lot of executives, they're so used to leading the helm, but still being behind the scenes. Like stepping into visibility is a very new concept for a lot of them, right? They've just been heads down wanting to be profitable companies or superpowered teams or respond to the street properly because they are a public company. But we know that we're now in a time where your company brand is now synonymous with who heads it, and that they cannot be separated anymore. We are at a time where we're in the era of who knows you. If they know you, what do you stand for? And a lot of buyers' decisions, over 57% of decisions, are being made before a customer or client even buys from the company anymore, because they want to know, does this company align with my values, especially in this time where there's so much political upheaval? Do I want to support certain movements or ideologies that I support or don't support? So when we start to work with these thought leaders and executives, we talk about that. Like, what are your values? What's your unique point of view? And then also, if they're uncomfortable with visibility, this is the brain hack I give all of them. And I'm really glad to share with your audience. And that is, there is someone out there right now that is waiting to hear you and your point of view and your voice so that you can free them from wherever they might be stuck. And so even these executives with this myriad of experience, whether it's, I bootstrapped the startup and now I've raised $30 million, and so I'm brand new at this, or I've been leading these B2C companies and they're, Fortune 500. There's still these moments where there's someone out there that needs to hear that specific person's point of view. And when you do that, you get out of your own way of feeling self-conscious about visibility. And I'll also say this, and I think you've modeled this so beautifully, Christina, and that is, just to be visible, it doesn't mean you have to be loud and obnoxious. You can still be your natural, approachable self who does have authority. And then there are moments in that authority, it can be always human-centered. It can always be from a place of, this is what I know about the human experience based on my experience leading these companies, right? So it's a mixed bag.
Point, and it's something that I've definitely had to overcome on myself. And when I first started, there was quite a dichotomy I was facing within myself, because prior to starting my business, I had never been on social media, like publicly. Even like a personal account had maybe a handful of pictures from when I was like 17. And facing the desire to show up and to be an expert and to build a personal brand with the kind of bubble that I wanted to stay in was really challenging. And then anyone that's in this position, I feel like they resonate with the fact that you go online and left, right, and center, someone wants to sell you their strategy. And there's so many strategies and there's so many competing strategies. And it's not even that you're not sure which one to go for, but I think often people get tempted by the way they're sold the strategy rather than approaching it from the perspective of, is this the right one for me, especially sustainably? Considering what I like to call like my personal prerequisites, like what do I actually need? What are my values? What is my point of view? And what's a sustainable approach to be able to bring that in a way that I'm still comfortable with, so that I don't, give up after a week after the first negative comments and just like delete everything entirely. Right. And so I think that's a perspective that more people should kind of slow down and consider, because there is no right way. There's a right way for you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fun one. But I'd love to know, like I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and you've done so many amazing things. How did you sort of navigate and pivot and get into what it is that you're doing now?
I think that was like one of the first biggest lessons I had, finally adulting. I grew up raised by a very hardworking single mom, with really adopting the immigrant mentality from my grandfather, who came out over here from Russia and Poland with nothing. And that hard work ethic and being a contributor and a citizen and digging in and working hard would lead to loyalty, a gold watch, pension. Well, we know that that's not true. And so at that first adulting lesson, were in my 20s, when I just really started my career, and there I was at a very fast-paced ad agency that focused on pharma. And I was one of the visual designers that also had the task of assigning like what was the big narrative attached to these visual stories. So also verbal narratives. And one of the owners of this agency was this brilliant, multi-lettered, like he had, all the MBA and then the doctorate, and on and on and on after his name. And I remember asking him, like, how did you arrive where you arrived? And he said, here's the secret. Life is a zigzag. There's no straight lines. There's no one track of anything. And when you speak to accomplished people, overall, you're going to find that they have had 3 to 5 different careers or 3 to 5 different pursuits that led into this career. And that really released something in my brain in my 20s, like, oh, there's so many ways to have an abundant career and life, but it doesn't have to always be in the same niche or industry. So quite transparently, I had a prior career. I had been a New York actor and performer. And if you speak to actors at all or performers, you're going to go where you can make some bread and butter in between jobs. And I just so happened to be given the opportunity through a client that I had served when I was a waitress at a French bistro, a very popular one in New York City. One day after a year of serving them, they said, I really like the way you think. So me and my partner were talking. What if we trained you to be a graphic designer and motion designer and storyteller, specifically for our clients, which were Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan, and American Express?
Wow. What an opportunity.
It was an incredible opportunity. And they're like, we have nothing to gain. The only thing is, we're going to train you for the next 2 weeks during the day, which may interfere with auditioning and with rehearsals. But then the way you'll pay us back is we make a profit off of you. That it was like a temp agency model, right? And so that was the beginning of my career. I cut my teeth as a visual designer, motion designer, UX, who was telling stories also verbally, like with headlines. And I put together these really important pitch decks for first-year analysts who were pitching to really big companies. We were on the advent of startups, right? And so that's where this whole journey began. Was, we can tell stories that can be pulled out of dry data into something that still evokes imagination. Yeah.
I have my own graduate school days where there was so much dry data and storytelling wasn't like a thing. To this day, I struggle with storytelling. It's the most awkward and uncomfortable experience for me because it feels almost like make-believe in a sense. But it's wonderful when you are able to bring those stories in, especially with data. And so I kind of want to go 2 ways with this. I want to circle back and hear your perspective on how much importance does storytelling really have? And then I also want to get into the nitty-gritty because I'm sure you have so much experience with this, but a single word choice can completely change the meaning of the entire story and the reactions to it. And so I'll sort of give both balls to you and pick.
Well, let me work backwards because I love that. I mean, I always say, words create worlds, they create wars. Words are blessings and spells.
Yes.
And so, yes, a use of a word in a headline, we're talking now marketing or brand, or in an actual authored journal entry, email, newsletter, or even an article, can turn people's brain off, or it can open it up. It can divide people, it can unite people. And so words have a lot of power. And that's why I love being able to be a messenger, right? I've been told many times by clients, by friends and family, that I have a way of tapping into the vein of a word that can really resound through whatever it is, right? And so that is a gift for sure. And then going back to storytelling, why is it so important was the question. Is that right? Yeah. Now we're going to go back into, which I know because you also work with like neuroscience, Christina. And so I love that, right? So when we think about the brain, sometimes they call it the lizard brain, right? If we use Maslow's hierarchy, it's like we have the archaic caveman brain that's really trying to keep us surviving and thriving, right? There's so many ways to approach that. But the bottom line is what storytelling does is it actually will cut through to the lizard brain, the caveman brain, and say, let's tell stories in a way that are going to connect to this wired sense of, am I safe? And so a story, depending on how it is shaped, is actually going to reach through those recesses into that wiring and actually transport you out of caveman lizard brain into a present time or a future time. We look at luxury brands and they're like, imagine if. So they've transported you into a future self, right? And so what I think is beautiful about storytelling is it really is the modern transportation for the human brain to go places and to envision what is and what can be, or even what has happened, right? And when we think about certain brilliant historians that actually will take something that's historical, but then break it down in a modern way of telling a story about what was happening, for example, during Roman times, right? Like it is a brilliant way to break through that film where people can relate in the now.
See, that's a really good point because typically when I think of storytelling, I think of like once upon a time, this is what happened and this was the lesson. But the distinction to use that strategically to also paint the picture, a little moment for me because again, storytelling and I are not friends at the moment. Maybe that's also because I've got my two little kids and storytelling is also like very much once upon a time.
And I do wish there was a better way to talk about it. I do wish, like, you could say narrative, but people are like, what do you mean? You can say messenger. Well, what does that mean? There's sometimes a little bit of a religious connotation. So if there was a better word than like business storyteller, AI storyteller, like if there was a better term, I think it could be used because you're right. It could sound like once upon a time, and now I'm going to tell you something fictitious. So I'm going to make a spin of something.
We'll find the right word and come back to it. But I'd love to hear, because I imagine brand storytelling or the storytelling of your product or something, or the picture you're painting for your customers, your clients, totally different than like founder-led personal storytelling.
Yes.
I imagine. And so I'd love to unpack how a brand can do that and figure it out, or like what are some of the best practices to get started?
Yeah. So some of this audience may have heard of Building a Story Brand. It's a book written by Donald Miller, and I happen to have been certified by him in 2019. It is a framework and a way that businesses can tell stories where what they're doing is they're positioning themselves, the company, as the guide, and that the customer, the client, the buyer who is being served is the hero. And then again, if we go into archaic storytelling, how stories are built, we see that in every really great story, whether it's a book or a movie, at the top and the front of the movie enters the hero. The hero normally has a weakness, a blind spot. They can't really see themselves. They may not be able to see the path ahead. They may not even know what their superpower is at the top of the story. And yet they are set upon a journey, right? And in that journey along the way, there's all sorts of other characters. There's the villain, there's the best friend, But how do they find their way? Well, in comes the guide,
Mm.
right? So when the guide comes in, they say, hey, listen, at one point I was you. So there's all of a sudden this empathy and relation. And because I was you, I know how to traverse this very rocky journey ahead. So I'm going to make everything about you, and we're going to get through this together until we hit the summit. And so how do you translate that for businesses? One of the biggest mistakes businesses do in their marketing, whether it's their website, social media, emails, digital ads, they're making it about themselves. Like, I'm making up a generic headline in my brain right now, right? I land on a website, let's just say it is a tech company, and either they're using like big buzzwords like, innovative systems that move the world.
Mm. Sounds exactly like a headline.
I don't even know really what that means and how that applies to me and how you're going to help me what? Survive and thrive. Now, if you changed it and you said something like software for your operations to run smoother without losing inventory, making that up. I am someone who, let's just say I sell manufacturing parts, right? I'm a B2B company, or I'm a B2C. I do cosmetics. And so I need to keep track of my inventory. That headline is going to hit me in a way where all of a sudden I feel heard and seen, because what I'm looking for is a system that can make my operations run smoother where I'm not losing inventory.
Gotcha. And so do you find that it's okay? For me, that reminds me almost of like the niching down concept and how so
Mhm.
many people fear niching down because it's like, well, I'm losing out, but my innovative systems could get so many more clients, right? Do you find there's that same kind of tension with switching the story?
Sometimes most clients that come to us, they're coming to us because, well, when they're still prospects, they're like, something is wrong. Sales are not moving. People are confused by what we do, especially if you have buzzwords like that headline I just made up. My team is not agreeing. We have such internal food fighting. We can't get out of our way. And, the C-suite is saying one story to the street. Sales is saying a whole different story to the buyer. And then marketing is saying something completely different, which is making buyers and customers very frustrated and angry with us, which then gets back to the street, right? So what creating this story does is it makes a very cohesive, many of body, but one of mind focus internally for teams. And then for businesses, it is putting their customer or their buyer so fully in the spotlight that they feel heard and seen. That's the most important part of this kind of storytelling messages. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that makes total sense, and I can see how that can help eliminate so many of the like internal battles with the miscommunication that goes on between departments. But it reminds me of some of your favorite LinkedIn posts that I love are always about these leadership signals. And so I want to transition into that a little bit and how do you merge the signals internally, let's say, from top going down, but then like the brand signals and there's just signals everywhere and they all have to be cohesive. And so I'd love to start unpacking that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So what you're asking is how do you unify these different signals?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, or at least the way that I think about it, it's like the brand signals are almost like one set of vocabulary almost. And then the leadership team, or even if you get into like each department head, they have their own signals and their own vocabulary, if we will.
Mhm. Mhm.
And from my perspective, it's almost like you have to get everyone onto the same page, understanding each other's vocabulary.
Yes.
And that is kind of where a lot of that tension and butting heads can come up as well.
Yeah.
And so I personally think of signals slightly differently. I approach it from the perspective of communication. And I've broken it into like three signals, right? Like your mindset signals that happen before you even do anything, which influences how you show up. Your verbal signals, which is how you're actually communicating the words you're choosing, things like that. And then your external signals, which is like what people see. So if you're
Yeah.
talking to them and you look like you are a deer in the headlights, you're less likely to be believed versus if you're speaking and you look like, I'm trying to think of a nice word, but you don't look like a very nice cooperative person. They feel like they're being forced, right? And so that's my signal framework. And so I'd love to hear sort of your perspective and how
Yeah.
you approach it.
Yeah, so we have what I call the V5 framework, and it actually is a beautiful companion to what you were just saying, right? So first there's veracity. Let's get to the truth of things. We get all the leaders, decision makers in a room. Sometimes normally it's like a 2-day workshop, and we are workshopping values, purpose, promise, what is going on within the company. How do you, CEO, describe your product, your company? Okay, head of sales, how do you describe it? All right, let's put it all out on a whiteboard or pieces of paper. And now let's agree to the next part of the framework, which is verbally. What are we going to agree to are our word bank? And if we think of it as a word bank, only what has been deposited is what is going to be used. So if words, we need to agree what are the words that we're going to use so that nobody is off doing their own thing. So the signals that you're talking about, we are all going to agree. What are the signals? What is the system of words, the verbal? What are we going to agree to? And nothing varies out of that word bank. And then from there, there's visual. So then also, based on those words that inform design, how now are we going to appear based on what we landed on? And normally in this verbal piece, that's informed by veracity, which sometimes is even like, what are your customers saying? What are the customers that left? What did they say? What about prospects that decided not to buy? So we do deep research and interviewing because we will also want to use the words of the buyer, the customer, and the prospect. And so when we get to verbal, where we're getting deep into those nuggets and how it then will inform visual, we're also going to agree to that. We know this from a visuals perspective. There's a visual system and visual bank that you don't normally go out of, right? No, those aren't our brand colors. No, those aren't the icons we use. No, that's not the way we design things, right? So there's all these elements that make things cohesive. And then there's visibility, right? So now like you're talking about signals. So now that we're aligned on these signals, we've all agreed. Now, how are we going to step into visibility as a unified team, company in this industry? How are we going to show up? We also create these playbooks, right? Kind of like football or sports terminology where it's like, if this is the play, what are you going to do? Let's open this up. Okay. What are the scripts for the CEO pitching for fundraising? What are the scripts for customer success when you have a client that's very upset? What does sales say? What do marketing say? So you have these playbooks. So again, we've got this alignment on how we're going to go out into the world. How are we showing up again in all the marketing aspects? How are we showing up even in these mundane moments where somebody is wearing the swag of the company? They have the zippy jacket and they're standing in line at a grocery store. Guess what? You represent the brand right now. You don't represent yourself. So what are we agreeing to in going out in the world? And then the last is velocity. So the more we show up in visibility intentionally and strategically, the more we're going to have speed to market, to buyers, to leaders being positioned as authority to go speak, author, be tapped for an executive board, etc.
I love that. And my bread and butter as well is almost in the first 3 steps. And I find with the conversations I've had, so many people like to overlook them or skip them over, or just like, it's not that important. We'll come back to it, right? Like the results will speak for themselves. We don't need the same vocabulary. We'll figure it out, right? These are some of the things that I've heard. And it's always interesting to be able to trace back how much of the miscommunication, the frustration, and things really stem from, I'm calling it one thing, you're calling it something else. We're not on the same page, but we should be. And I especially love that you start with the values and getting everyone on the same page, because one of the things that I really lean into in leadership and executive presence is understanding not just your own motivation, but the motivation of each of your team members,
Mhm.
and being able to tailor what you're presenting or what you're asking of them to their own sort of like internal drivers. And I feel like your exercise is such a great way for people to really understand, at the very least, like, oh, one of the reasons that I've been miscommunicating with you and so incredibly mad is like you just don't even see it. You don't value the same thing as I. And like that amount of clarity, I feel like cannot be overlooked. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And we've seen the results. I mean, drastic results out of this type of work. We have seen companies go from being in the red to being back in the black within 90 to 180 days once everyone's on the same page and we've made these agreements. We've seen sales go up because then that verbal re-message and refresh really makes clients or buyers really feel seen and heard. And so they're like, oh, you just really, you melted my mind and my heart. And so I now feel seen and therefore I'm going to buy your product. Right. Yes, companies could do it the other way. It's much harder. And what we've seen is there's no mistake that the companies that have done this really hard work, it can go fast. We do it in sprints, but it can be hard work. Have a lot of success. And that there's no mistake, that they've closed the next Series B of $30 million or exited at 70 million or whatever it was that we were a part of. Right.
and that's incredible. And I think something that sort of contributes to that from my observations and my conversations is like a lot of these individuals are very analytical. And without getting too much into like personality differences, but I find there's a pattern where the more analytical you are, the more you want that like tangible proof. But so much of the work that you and I do that drives these results is like, I call them like almost like the invisible threads. They're the things that you can't see that completely drive your behavior and the behavior of everyone across the organization. But if you're overlooking them because you can't put your fingers quite on values in the same sense, I almost feel like it's a major blind spot for a lot of really
Mm,
sort of analytically driven individuals.
yeah. And that's where I always say you can't read your own label standing in your own jar, right? You need a mirror to see if your eyebrows are ruffled. So, right, you need sometimes the expert that is outside your company who's not breathing the same air to be able to tell you that there's something wrong, right? And so you can be analytical. It's actually a brilliant superpower. But if if you're always thinking you're the smartest person in the room, you may actually be missing an opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Okay, I want to circle back to storytelling because I feel like such a crucial one that I want to learn more about selfishly. What are some of the sort of like do's and don'ts of brand storytelling?
Yeah. Don't make it about you. Even your about in your bios and your social media or on your website, do not open about you. What would happen if you open up about your client's experience and symptoms right now?
Well, okay, I'm going to ask you a question about that one because sort of one challenge that I face constantly for myself is like my work is very confidential.
Mhm.
Many of the people I work with like just like please like no reference, no mention. I've never been here, like we've never
Yes.
spoken kind of. And so for me, I think also with my background in academia, like extremely strict ethics and like
Yes.
confidentiality rules constantly. And so bringing that mindset to like social media or online business has been really hard for me because talking about anyone, even anonymized, feels like a breach of trust for me.
Mm.
And so it's been a very interesting position to be in where I'm like, I have these stories, but I don't want to share them. And so when you say something like make it about them, my automatic thinking goes to like, okay, well, like what are the benefits or what are the things you can get from me without stories? Which is also why I have this aversion to stories, because I'm like, it's a breach of trust unless it's me, myself, and I being like, once upon a time, here's what I did.
Well, let's break that down. Like, let's use you as just an example for your audience. Okay. So when your clients come to you, why have they even thought to reach out in the first place? What is going on normally for them? And this is just a generic sweeping, it's a generalized statement. Like, what is one of the main things that is really getting them in such discomfort that they're reaching out to you?
I'd say it's either a very intense self-awareness of not living up to their own standard of something like communication or leadership related, or getting very direct recent feedback of like, you need to work on this.
Right. So, for example, if we were going to, let's pretend you and I start to work together and we've done a lot of the veracity part, right? The turning over all the stones of who Christina and Christina's brand is, right? And what your products and your offers are. But if you open your about with something like, you have always believed you were a born leader, and yet you have recently received the feedback from your team that they're not connecting to you, or that your communication style is not being received very well. I know where I understand where you are.
So simple.
Does that feel like you're doing any breach of trust?
No. It's clean.
Did I just transport you for a moment where you feel seen?
Yes.
Yeah. So that is storytelling. It doesn't have to be a big, dramatic, right? It's really just getting to the heart of, let's name the symptoms of what is going on in your life that has made you reach out to me, the company, right? And then from there, now that you've leaned in with empathy, when somebody also, and this goes back to these archetypes. So the guide is always like, I've been where you are, or I understand what you're going through. And I'm now going to give you a framework and steps on what we're going to do to get out of this. And at the end of those steps, here's what success is going to look like. We're going to get to the summit. And by the way, if you decide not to use these steps, here's what it will look like if you don't follow these steps, but not like instilling so much fear that they're frozen or they feel guilt or shame, but just this is what it looks like. You will continue to feel this way. You will continue to have teams not connect with you, right? So does that help?
It does, but it's an interesting one because it makes me feel like having a major brand makes it easier because it's less personal. I run my business solo, right? Solo founder. To say I've been where you are is an interesting place as an individual, because it's almost like, am I losing some of my credibility if I say, oh my God, I've had imposter syndrome for years, but I promise I can help you get out of it?
But you could, but the positioning actually for you, Christina, would be then something like, you're not alone. Believe it or not, all the people I work with are experiencing what have experienced what you're experiencing right now.
Okay, yes, but then that almost like borders that breach of trust for me because it's that word choice, right? Where it's like all of the people, and therefore anyone that knows anyone that's worked with me is like, oh, that person, I see. Right? It's like, I don't know, for me it's like such a gray area with the word choice,
I
but I
think this goes back to analysis though, right? And then it goes back to my statement. I think the biggest key to really good brand storytelling, whether you're a solopreneur, a personal brand, or a company brand, is it's not about you. And so then sometimes we also have to question the stories we tell ourselves. Are they just stories that we're creating out of supposition, or is it based in fact? That's where you can apply analytics. So, do we know what you just said is true, or is this a supposition of what we think our clients may think?
yeah. Well, that's such an interesting one because we can go like on a whole part two about the internal stories we tell ourselves, but it's like
for another
it's
podcast.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I love that topic. I dive deep into it on a weekly basis, but it is an interesting thing to consider because how do I frame this? But it's like at a certain point, you're almost faced this like I've built this brand, I have this success. And I guess we're gonna go full circle back to these successful founders now building their personal brand. And I think that's a great opportunity to revisit the stories you tell yourself, but it also, I suspect, triggers a lot of uncomfortable feelings and conversations around, their self-imposed expectations, the standards they have for how they show up, even in like the nitty-gritty detail of like my video quality isn't up to par, therefore content creation is out of the question,
Mm.
right? And I think it's something that's slightly challenging for very successful people to get into because it makes them question so many assumptions that they have about them that have made them successful.
Mhm.
And so I'd love to hear sort of your input on that as well.
Yeah. Wow. We could unpack the story and tell ourselves. That would be like a 2-hour podcast. But it kind of goes back to when you are put in a position to manage P&L, manage people, manage your company. You have people on payroll that you have to show up for. When you place yourself in a place of it's bigger than me, some of these things that we get tripped up by, like, oh, my video quality isn't good. I don't have right sound equipment. My hair is weird, or I don't have it here. Whatever it is, it actually will minimize if you think of the bigger mission of why are you a leader? Whether you created your own business or you're put in this place of responsibility for all these other people. When we put ourselves in that position, all these other things are minimized. And like I said before, if you're uncomfortable with being on camera, well, then fine, don't go on camera. What happens? Again, there's so many forms in this incredible era that we're in of digitization of everything, right? And really, that's really bottom line. That is what personal brand is. It is digitized reputation 24/7. How are you showing up? So you can show up in like there's one executive that we work with. They don't want to be on video. They absolutely hate it. They have their own stories about how they look, why it's not good. They don't like their voice. Great. But their written voice is very, very powerful. So let's have you show up. What is the channel that is attracting your customers? For them, it is threads through Instagram. Great. So what are the things that you are educating about from your point of view? Great, let's do that. And then how does that maybe translate that little soundbite? Could that translate into a longer article that we're making now on Substack where now people are subscribing? What is it? Right? So it can show up and transmute in so many different ways that to not show up in visibility in a format that feels, I won't say comfortable, but in a format that doesn't feel like you're having a root canal,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
There's
that's
no
just
excuse.
it.
No.
Yeah, I mean, coming back full circle one more time, it's like there's so many strategies, and every person who's running a business will sell you their strategy. And it's about having that discernment and understanding that just because Instagram is a popular platform or TikTok is a like popular platform doesn't mean I have to restrict myself to that platform or to the best practices of that platform. One of my like core brand pillars is really, really emphasizing like you get to do it your way based on your psychology and your mindset at the moment. And so, like, I'm right there with you. If visibility is so incredibly hard, pick your hard, but still be visible, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, in a time where you have people really expediting their careers and their monetary fortune through all these different channels, we don't really have an excuse to hide anymore. And you're not going to be able to attract new streams of business by staying invisible. Like no one's going to know about your brand if you're not talking about it somehow out there in the ethosphere.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I will say, like, visibility is hard and visibility is challenging. And it's it is a hurdle to overcome, in my opinion, especially if you're used to being behind the scenes. But to your point, like knowing your why and knowing your values and thinking of the impact you can make. And I think something that helps a lot of people is understanding like who is your target audience based on the topic that you're talking about. And I think many people fear like the keyboard warriors, the trolls, everyone online who just leaves mean comments. And like, yes, at some point you'll come across that. But at the same time, like if it eases your mind, if you're targeting specific people in like a leadership space, like I feel like the percentage of trolls is higher in certain, aspects of social media than others. And at a certain point, like you just have to develop the thick skin and just do it and follow your why and follow your purpose and, align yourself with the platform that you chose based on your personal strengths and like your comfort level at the moment. And like again, like there's so much visibility fear. And I feel for everyone in that stage because I've been there too. Like the very first time I created content, I was a deer in the headlights. Like it was terrible. I hated it. And I still posted it just to like get over the fear and then checked consistently and consistently and consistently and got 0 likes. But it's okay. You move on.
You move on. And, and we know this, right? Impressions and likes are not always the things that lead to cash.
Yeah.
Building the signals or correcting the signals of what you would like people to think about when you're not in the room, about your brand, about you. All these little actions may not get any reactions, but there are lurkers out there. There are people watching who don't interact for those same reasons about fear of visibility that, it could be a month from now, it could be 10 years from now. And they could be like, oh, you know what? I know this brand that does XYZ that they're recommending to somebody who has the exact problem that your brand addresses. Right.
Yeah. That's exactly it. I mean, it's the long game.
Yeah.
It's the long game. So awesome. Any final thoughts? Anything else on your mind?
I think putting yourself out there every day, whether you are a leader of a company, whether you're the owner and the CEO of the company, whether you're a personal brand, it takes a lot of bravery to put yourself out in a way that is very focused, that is human-centered, that is heart-centered, and that is really with a mission of how are you helping who you serve thrive instead of survive.
Yeah.
And when you lean into understanding the power of words and storytelling, and you show up every day kind of wielding that as a weapon for good, it really can change the market and change how your company or your personal brand is showing up.
Yeah. I love that advice. And I think to add to that, it's the baby steps to adjust your comfort zone in the beginning. Shoot for the moon, but recognize it'll take you a little bit of time to get there. Awesome. And so for everyone listening who wants to connect with you, where should they find you? Where should they follow you?
LinkedIn is a really great place. I know that you'll probably place the link below, or you can go to our website, which is fortifiedbranding.com, and schedule a call with us if you're in a place right now where you're like, I need storytelling for my company, or I want to unify my team, or I want to work on my personal brand.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And I think we will need to do a part 2 to get into all the storytelling and identity work and the juicy stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.